If you're gardening, you're using fertilizer. Some fertilizers are BS in the right way, and other fertilizers are just BS.
This is some bullshit.
Welcome back, casual gardeners. What is a fertilizer, and why do you have to use them? And what are those BS ingredients that I'm talking about? That is this whole video today. Let's just start out by talking about the stuff that really works. These are the things that if you see them on the label, you can trust them because we know they do things. Probably the obvious things that we notice are N, P, and K. N stands for nitrogen, P stands for phosphorus, and K stands for potassium. No, actually, it's kalium, which the snooty science people decided sounded cooler than potassium. It actually is kind of nice because if it was NPP, we'd easily forget which P was which, and it wouldn't do us as much good. So I'm happy sticking with K for potassium, and hopefully you can see why we're stuck with it too. N, P, and K are 3 of the 6 macronutrients that all plants need all the time in pretty respectable quantities.
Verando's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes.
Plants need nitrogen to make proteins, and they need it to make chlorophyll. And that's why we say that nitrogen helps grow foliage, because that's where most of the chlorophyll is found. But honestly, protein is found throughout the plant. We just don't think of them as protein rich because it's not animal protein, and we have this habit of thinking of meat as a protein source. Phosphorus is important for building DNA. It's important for building phospholipids, which are the complex oils that make the cell membranes in plants. And then potassium is really important for moving liquids around in the plant. And also they use it to make photosynthesis happen. Plants can't do photosynthesis without potassium. So we say that potassium is for roots, but honestly, it's for everything. The other 3 macronutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. You're going to see those in fertilizer a little bit less often, and that's okay. We also know those are important. Calcium works a lot like potassium. It's used to move fluids around in the plant. I believe it has a role in photosynthesis as well. Photosynthesis is complicated. Plants use magnesium to make chlorophyll, and then sulfur is important for making certain classes of amino acids. So that's your 6 macronutrients that your plants definitely need. If you see them listed in your fertilizer, they're not the bad kind of BS, they're the good kind. Now beyond the macronutrients, you've got micronutrients, and there are a lot of them, and I don't remember them all. Molybdenum's one, manganese is one. There are a lot. I'm gonna list them right here. Boom. Micronutrients are used in much smaller quantities unless you're doing like aquaponics or growing in containers. They shouldn't come up at all. The macro and micronutrients are usually intensely quality controlled, and if you were to sue the company, they would come back at you with some documentation proving that that quantity and not more than that and not less than that was in fact present in their fertilizer. So we can be pretty safe assuming that the macronutrients and micronutrients do stuff and are there. One thing that I didn't enjoy when I worked for a fertilizer company as QC and R&D is that they tend to jump on fads. And whenever new science comes out and we find out that plants benefit from something, all of the fertilizer companies like to kind of rush and try to be the first one to include that something in their fertilizer, in some line of products. And they'll usually market it as being like cutting edge, and these other companies suck because they don't have it. And that's where we run into the bad kind of BS. And I'm just going to talk about 3 of those, but there's a lot more. It kind of works like the makeup companies. You know how you'll see like a makeup commercial or a shampoo commercial, and they'll use these made up sounding words and say they do things in their product that the other products don't do, or maybe they'll have exotic ingredients that they put in there. Our mascara is made from tiger milk to give you the stamina of a tiger. Rawr. We get that in fertilizers. So let's talk about the claims to ignore. A big one, the company that I used to work for, who I will not name because they have lawyers, did this a lot, is Bioactivators. If a fertilizer claims to have a bioactivator in it, Probably there is something in there that they're calling a bioactivator. Probably the fertilizer company themselves has not done the research to verify that their bioactivator is doing what they claim it is, or they've done really crappy experiments. We would do bioactivator experiments just comparing our fertilizer against no fertilizer. And of course, that's always going to look better. What we should have been doing is comparing our fertilizer with the bioactivator against a dummy fertilizer without the bioactivator, but with everything else. I suspect there are other fertilizers that are doing experiments that are similar, where their control isn't really a control, and it's just kind of garbage. Bioactivators are regulated, but that doesn't mean that we have consumer protections when it comes to bioactivators. The regulations around bioactivators focus on the fact that fertilizer ingredients can be toxic in the environment. I mean, even the macronutrients, the stuff that we know we need, can be toxic in environments. Nitrogen and phosphorus, for example, are responsible for eutrophication of bodies of water. So when you get the algal blooms and you get the toxic algae and people are, their dogs get sick from drinking in a pond, that's often caused by fertilizer runoff or nutrient runoffs of some kind. So even the good stuff in fertilizer can be bad stuff in fertilizer, and that's why they regulate it. But the problem is that regulation only extends so far as, is this an addition of toxic materials to the environment? And it doesn't go so far as, does the bioactivator do what the fertilizer company claims the bioactivator does? So when you buy a fertilizer with a bioactivator, you are not necessarily getting your money worth, and you might as well just not buy that fertilizer because it has fancy words about a bioactivator. Another trend that is backed by science, but also not, is the tendency to advertise fertilizers as containing mycorrhizal fungi or mycorrhizal fungal spores. And the idea is that mycorrhizae can contribute to healthy soil and can boost your plant growth. Therefore, we put the spores in our fertilizer, and if you buy our fertilizer, you get these benefits. And it seems really straightforward until you realize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of species of fungal mycorrhizal agricultural critters out there. And most of the time, whatever they've cultured is just like one species, maybe two species, and it's not necessarily native to where you live, and it's not necessarily a companion to the plants you want to use it with. So maybe they've cultured a mycorrhizae that likes to hook up and rock out with corn, and then you're scattering it around in your garden, not growing corn. Do you know that you're getting any benefit from it? No, and neither do they, and none of their claims are valid. Another problem with arbuscular mycorrhizae in fertilizer is that they don't take into account that you have native mycorrhizae that you are possibly interfering with by adding this cultured mycorrhizae to your garden. It is a living organism. It could possibly have the capacity to be invasive. Nobody's checked. They're just asking you for a little bit more money because they've included it in their product. If you do good soil husbandry, if you regularly add carbon sources to your soil and maybe not over-tilling your garden, will contribute to the native growth of native fungi and bacteria that will benefit your plants and will interact with your plants for free. The last one I want to talk about is the addition of humates, fulvic acids, or humic acids to the fertilizer. What all of these are is the byproducts of the decomposition of living things. So it's the stuff that makes your compost black. When you have that good finished compost and it has that beautiful black color in it, those are humic acids. Fulvic acids are just a category of humic acid. Humates are just the basic version. They've lost a proton. If you add acid to a humate, you've got humic acid again. They are important and they will improve your soil, but not necessarily at the quantities that you're getting them in your fertilizer. They're not able to add enough humic acids to do anything to your soil. Humic acids are important for coordinating with metals and other nutrients in the soil and holding on to them and keeping them available to your plants. So they do good stuff. They make your soil hold on to water a little bit better as well. But the problem is that you need a certain amount and you're not necessarily getting the amount of humic acids that you need to get any benefit from adding those humic acids when you get them in your fertilizer. If you want humic acids, just like with the arbuscular mycorrhizae, practice good gardening techniques. Add carbon to your soil. As those carbon-rich materials break down, they will naturally contribute much more humic acid to your soil than you can get from a concentrated fertilizer, and they will do it at my favorite price point for free. So maybe you're asking yourselves, why does Dustin have this bee in his bonnet, this stick in his buns, this angsty, emo feeling that I obviously have towards fertilizer companies? So the fertilizer company I used to work for was definitely the bad kind of BS. I should have realized that when I saw that they were selling their product through like multi-level marketing, but I was just super happy to have a job that used some of the skills that I'd picked up in college and allowed me to use really cool instrumentation like inductively coupled plasma optical emission spectrophotometers, which are actually more fun to say than they are to use. But you know, that's a cool piece of equipment for my resume. So I was really excited about that. It was my first grown-up job. They were slimy in a couple of ways. Their experiments were garbage. I wasn't allowed to design good experiments. Their claims were garbage. And then shortly after I quit, they were fined $2 million for dumping toxic waste down a storm drain. That's why I have the anger. There's a little peek into my personal life. This video was maybe a little bit more negative than most of my videos. Let me know in the comments if you would like to learn more about fertilizer from me. We can talk about fertilizer almost endlessly. There's so much to talk about with fertilizer. Like this video if you're still watching, because clearly you did, or else you would have clicked away. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel so that I can, you know, share more about gardening with you. If you'd like to become a channel member, I do have a join option down below the video. Thank you once again for joining me here in my garden, and I hope you have a wonderful time in your own.